she's going to do here. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, Leah.
I think you very recently arrived, really.
Just 6 weeks on the ground, and that includes 2 weeks of quarantine. So that was an interesting way to begin my time here in Malta.
Absolutely. And is it your first time here?
It is. Although I lived in Europe previously, both as a child and an adult, I never had the opportunity to come down to Malta. I read about how beautiful it was, how exciting it was, how much at the crossroads of Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, and where it sits. But I never had the chance. So when I was given this opportunity, I was so excited.
What were your first impressions when you arrived?
Well, my first impressions were the inside of a room, unfortunately. Those first 2 weeks were tough. I didn't see the water for the first 15 days, and I think that that's really hard when you know that you're in such a beautiful place like Malta, surrounded by these beautiful seas. But when I was freed from my gilded cage, I went out, and my first impressions were just how wonderful and warm the welcome of the Maltese people were. Everybody has been amazing, opening their hearts and their homes to me, but also how much culture and history is here. I'm overwhelmed. It seems like every time I turn a corner, there's something new and exciting and old and fascinating to dig into, and I've really enjoyed that so far.
And in such a small space.
It's really packed in there. It's great.
So you've got lots to see, I think.
Yes.
You've had a very interesting background. I was just reading your bio, which they sent me from the embassy. Your father was an army officer, and you traveled a lot with him. Tell us about that.
I was very blessed to grow up in the house of an army. We call them army brats when you're the child of an army officer. But my parents were also military brats. My father was an army brat because his mother and father were in the army, and then my mother was an Air Force brat. Her father was in the Air Force. And so we have a real culture of serving our nation around the world. And so as a child, I was very lucky. I lived in Japan as a small child. I lived there for 4 years. And then as a teenager, I lived in Belgium. I lived at SHAPE headquarters associated with NATO. And that was, I think, a very special and formulaic experience for me because it wasn't an American base. And we have a lot of American bases in Germany and other places, but in this case it was a NATO base. And so we had 16 nationalities, and I was on the swim team. And so there were 16 nations, and we would sing songs and do cheers and chants in everything from English to Italian to French to German to Danish. And I think that that really was the foundation and where I fell in love with the idea of the international relations realm.
Is that where you got the idea to join the diplomatic service?
Well, I think that that's where the seed was planted. And then as I matured and explored my future, I realized that maybe my dream of being a doctor, which is what I used to think I wanted to be, wasn't really the right choice for me, but that I wanted to represent my country, serve my nation.
Absolutely, and you have served your nation in various countries also. I was fascinated to see the countries you've been in Afghanistan,
yes.
And you've served also in Europe also too. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Sure. So I'm very lucky. I've been able to serve around the world. I've served in South Africa. I served in the Netherlands. I served in Suriname in South America. It's the smallest country in South America. I like the small countries, I do. I also served in the UAE, and I served in Afghanistan, as you mentioned. And I also did some tough assignments in other places for shorter assignments. Lebanon during the 2006 war. Yes. And Congo, where I served as a peace negotiator, helping to build a future for the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yes, and you do have a family
and
a family life. And how do you cope with that? Your children now are teenagers, I believe.
They are. I like to take them along for the experience, similar to the experience I had as a child following my parents and around the world. I think it's a gift that I get to give them, this exposure to the whole world. They have a very, very open perspective on world affairs and their own country. And I think sometimes children who get to live overseas, maybe they appreciate their own country just a little bit more.
Yes. And you originate from Texas originally?
I am. It's the great state of Texas.
Yes. And how often do you go there? How much time have you spent there?
So off and on throughout my life, I've been there. I was just there this summer. My parents still live there, so it's a nice place to be able to go and visit. And so as often as I can, because I miss the brisket and the tacos and all the wonderful food, and I miss that Texas spirit that we have.
Yes, it's quite unique, I think.
People say so, and
Yes.
I think they may be correct.
Yes, I'd like to take some moments to speak about the forthcoming U.S. election,
Absolutely.
because obviously each state has its own identity, and then come in the swing states. And how do people all around the world find it so exciting?
It's exciting.
It is.
It is politics on the biggest stage in the world. And I think that our presidential elections are fun and dramatic and passionate, but really embody the American spirit. This idea of open conversations, talking about the tough issues, putting it all out there, and really discussing and debating so that when it comes time to come to the poll and cast your vote, you know exactly where the candidates stand, and you use your voice, that voice of democracy, that voice of choice, and you express your desires for your future in that ballot box. And I think that really resonates with people around the world. I think it does.
Do you think quite a lot of people change their minds right before election?
I think that there are different types of voters. I think, as in any democracy, you have people who traditionally vote a single way. But I think of some of my family members who maybe they're not particularly political. They're very American, but not politically American. And I really think that they listen hard, and they wait, and they try to hear all the issues and really understand the candidates' points of view before they cast that ballot.
Yes.
So I think some people do wait until the last moment.
Hard times with COVID-19.
So hard.
Still speaking about the election and referring to the election, how much do you think is going to affect the voting?
Well, I think that in any election, the current events that are happening, any current event, is a driving factor in how people think about it. And I do think that this discussion, this issue, is on people's mind. How can it not be? I mean, we have a struggle, a humanity struggle across the globe. It's tragic. And people are thinking about it and what it means, and not just health-wise, but also economically and about the future. So I think it's going to play a role.
What are your thoughts on the balance of economics and health when it comes to COVID-19?
Oh, well, I think that you've hit the nail on the head when we talk about why this particular pandemic is so difficult and challenging. I'm really excited because we have 3 vaccines in the U.S. that are currently in the final phases of testing. So I'm hopeful that this choice will be, we won't have to think about it too much more in the future. But I think that it's weighing on everyone's mind, and I think that there's a balance that has to be achieved. And
it's very hard to achieve that balance, really.
I would argue that it's potentially impossible to find exactly the right
Yes,
balance.
Absolutely. You say your children are going to stay here with you in Malta. Will they be attending school in Malta?
So my children will come here and spend time with me. However, my daughter is preparing for university. It's that time in our house to bid her farewell. So she'll return to the United States to attend school there. And she's actually there right now to attend school. And so I'll miss them, and they'll come here as frequently as possible to visit and really get to see as much of Malta as possible.
And with your children being so far away, and again the pandemic, do you worry about them when it comes to COVID, or are they quite sensible?
So I'm a mother. Of
Yes.
course I worry. Yes. And but we're trying to find our way, navigate this very difficult situation, and we're making personal choices, but we're choosing to educate ourselves as we make those choices. And I feel like we're doing the best that we can, and the kids seem happy with the choices that we've made, but we're flexible and we're remaining informed, and we can change our mind if we need to.
Yes. In many ways, it's made younger people become more mature, I think.
Absolutely. I was so impressed with my children and their friends and their resilience when we basically shut the world down last March. Their ability to find new ways to connect, to educate themselves, to continue to engage. I was learning from them every day new ways that I could cope with the isolation that we were facing.
Yes. Do you agree with online learning?
I think that it's a solution when the situation warrants it. And I think that that's only a decision that can be made through education, information, and an assessment of what is happening at that time.
Yes. I'd like to refer to the Black Lives Matter campaign, something that's affected people in the USA and all around the world.
Absolutely.
There were protests even here in Malta.
That's what I understand.
What are your thoughts about it? And going forward, how can we learn from that?
So I had an interesting experience. Just before I came here, we were in Washington, D.C., the kids, my husband and I, and what I found fascinating about the whole episode and the protests, was it really created an opportunity for me to have an honest and open dialogue with my children. And I talked to my other parent friends, and they were doing the same. So I took my children into Washington, D.C., and we went to Black Lives Matter Square and Street, and we walked through. And afterwards, we went and we sat, and we had an honest and frank discussion, because that's what these incidents do for us. They create opportunities to have a dialogue. And what I love about America and our Constitution is that we talk about forming a more perfect union. So in our own Constitution, we admit that we're not perfect, that we have room to grow and change. And what I like about America and what this is creating is that it's creating an opportunity for us to have sometimes a very passionate dialogue about the real struggles and the real challenges that we face and the opportunities that we have to change ourselves for the better.
Yes. What are your biggest challenges that you foresee with this posting in Malta?
Well, there's so much to do here. I don't know how I'll get it all done. In all seriousness, we are so engaged with the Maltese people and government on issues that span from security to innovation to commercial diplomacy, all the way over to empowerment. I want to give each of those things as much attention and energy that I can. And I think the hard challenge for me will be to try to give each thing my best. But there's so many that I worry that I don't have enough hours in the day.
Absolutely. You sound like you are a very energetic person. With regards to Americans living in Malta and Maltese people who can vote in the United States, is there a procedure that they should follow once they're here?
Yes, absolutely. And we have the consular section at the embassy who's happy to engage and assist U.S. citizens who are resident in Malta and Gozo in asking for and obtaining a ballot. And if people will go to the U.S. Embassy webpage, we have a button they can click on that will put them in contact with our consular chief, and she is happy to assist them and help them vote in the upcoming election.
So it's an easy process.
Very easy.
And they'll be guided all the way
Absolutely,
through it.
absolutely.
Just to close for today, I know we'll stay in touch as I've done with your predecessors, but a message to the Maltese people with you arriving here, perhaps.
Absolutely. I look forward to working with you. I look forward to continuing to build upon this strong relationship that the United States and Malta enjoy. We enjoy the same values, shared values, mutual trust, and a vision of open society and democracy. I also look forward to exploring your country and finding what's around every corner and discovering the history and learning about everything that goes on here. 3 years isn't going to be enough. I just know that in the end, I will leave here with a list of things that I wish I had done that I didn't have that time to do. But I want to thank the Maltese people for their warm welcome. Grazie hafna.
And you speak fluent Arabic too, I hear.
I do.
You do.
It's a little helpful.
So it will be quite easy picking up our language, I think.
I've seen some words that I recognize.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Green. I'm with Gwendolyn Green, who is the new Chargé d'Affaires for the United States Embassy in Malta. We're having a short commercial break, and I'll be with you very soon.